our previous video we had a look at micro scale climates, and in the video before that we had looked at the mesoscale climates. So you have these images that have been stuck into your workbook. I would very strongly suggest that if you haven't done so already, you annotate those images. It's very useful if when you are watching the videos you have your transcript turned on, or at least the closed captions turned on, and that will help you with the process of annotating the diagrams. So now we're going to go on to dig down into a little bit more detail about the surface of urban structures. So we did talk about this a little bit already, about this concept of albedo. That's the reflectivity of the surface. So what we find is that rural areas have larger evapotranspiration rates, and those open spaces are much better able to reflect solar radiation into space. That's because you have a different level of albedo in rural areas. The albedo tends to be a lot higher. There's that more reflexivity there. It's very different when we start talking about urban environments. Urban environments tend to be dominated by darker surfaces. They have a lower albedo, so less of that solar radiation is directly reflected back into the atmosphere. And the other issue that we have here is that solar radiation will be absorbed by the buildings, so the buildings will heat up, and then those buildings will release that heat back into the environment at night time. You'll be able to actually experience this. You'll be able to see that difference between daytime and nighttime temperatures in urban areas. And you'll actually also, if you walk past a concrete building, large concrete building or wall in the evening, you'll actually feel that is considerably hotter. So that energy, heat, particularly during the night time, is re-radiated back into the urban environment. So then that explains why we have higher temperatures during the night in our urban environments. Zooming in even closer on this image, you can see that there is that complexity. Some of the surfaces of urban buildings, particularly modern day skyscrapers, can be highly reflective. If the building is made out of steel and glass, you have that high level of reflexivity. So then, as we said in previous videos, you do get that reflection, you do get that bouncing around. So you see the yellow building in the middle there could get twice as much solar radiation, because it gets the direct sunshine from above, but also gets the reflected sunshine or solar radiation from this building that you can see there. So when answering your questions, key thing here is understanding that this is a system. These are well understood things. We understand the system, we understand the physics and the mechanism behind that, so we should be able to deal with that in our urban environments. There is that reflexivity, there is that complexity, and we can see it in this image here. So there's this whole question about reflective surfaces. Are they a good thing or are they a bad thing? Now initially you might think it might be a good idea to make sidewalks, pavements and roads a lighter colour, make them highly reflective. It sounds counterintuitive, but you should not do that, because you can see here that if you have that highly reflective surface, what happens is at the sidewalk level or the street level, that energy is reflected straight back up. So you can see this poor chap here, he's pretty hot because he gets that reflected radiation, reflected sun rays, and also there's that possibility that it's also, you've got this reflection of light off the light colour road surface directly in the buildings. So that's going to cause all sorts of trouble. So be very careful when making suggestions like saying we just have light coloured surfaces with a high albedo. It really depends on the situation. So in general, what we find is that street level should have a low albedo. That sounds counterintuitive. If the albedo is high, it's highly reflective. We get into these problems for the pedestrians, motorists and surrounding buildings. I would suggest rooftops then. For a rooftop, it makes a lot more sense to have it as a highly reflective surface, paint that white. But the other thing that you need to consider is if you have surrounding taller buildings, we could get ourselves into that same situation where that solar radiation is reflected off the rooftop into another taller surrounding building. So really, when we're thinking about this, what we need to think very, very carefully is the exact position and location, the exact situation. As I said before, these are well understood mechanisms, and we can use artificial intelligence and computer modelling to actually design our environments to minimise these effects and maximise the benefits of having an appropriate levels of albedo in various locations in the city. So in this video, we've talked in a bit more detail about albedo and reflexivity and how that affects temperature, but we also thought about the complexity of the mechanisms that are going on here, and it's not always a good idea in all locations to have a high albedo or a low albedo. It really depends on the specific circumstances. So in the next video, we're going to go on to look at radiation and sunshine. We're going to be talking about the problem of urban canyons, which is particularly dominant in cities like Hong Kong. And we're also going to go on to think about the impacts that smog and pollution have on the balance of energy in urban environments when looking at their climates.